was a great session this year. I was privileged to have my daughter, who had come home from her LDS mission 5 days before the legislative session. She came home, and so she was able to come and intern for me. I told her it was like swan diving into Babylon after being on a mission for a year and a half, but it was a great experience for me as a mother to have her with me. I always miss my family during the 7-week legislative session, and so it was great. I stay downtown Salt Lake Monday through Friday, and so she was my roommate, and it made it a lot more enjoyable for me. So maybe that's why the session was so much better for me. I don't know. But it was a good session. We dealt with a lot of sticky issues, a lot of difficult issues. Medical marijuana was one of the really difficult emotional issues that we dealt with. I personally introduced the 7 pieces of legislation that I actually ended up running. They all passed, and a couple of them were really important to me. One of them was, and I talked to Dr. Franson about this one quite a bit, was dealing with birthing centers. And now, you know, I have 5 children, and I had them all in a hospital with a doctor. So I've not necessarily been a huge midwife advocate or anything, but I am an advocate for good government and for fairness and the rule of law. And what we had happening was 11 years ago, a law was passed that said midwives can become licensed in the state of Utah if they have the proper education and experience. They can become licensed, and if they become licensed, they can practice in any out-of-hospital setting, which includes a licensed birthing center. But there was a board of market participants, okay, a CEO of a hospital, some doctors, some nurses, other healthcare industry individuals on this board that were appointed, and their job on this board was to determine all of the licensing requirements for every single healthcare facility in the state of Utah. They're called the Health Facility Committee. And this board has no state oversight. So they're under the Department of Health, but the Department of Health couldn't do anything. In state law, just says that the Department of Health had to do whatever this board came up with, whether it obstructed the law or not, whether they agreed with it or not. They just had to do whatever this board came up with. Well, the board for 11 years had been acting in a very anti-competitive way, and they had been obstructing the ability for anyone, midwives or physicians or anyone, to be able to open a licensed birthing center in the state of Utah, because there were 2 regulations that they had put in place and kept there on purpose for the purpose of obstructing for the free market, for restraining trade. And it was pretty bad when I started digging into it. So I ran a couple of bills. One of them was the committee licensing bill. I think it was SB 126, I believe. And then the birthing center bill was SB 108. And those 2 bills dealt with the committee itself to actually give some state oversight to that committee. And there were a few other committees under the Department of Health that were like this, that were made up of market participants who had no state oversight. So we dealt with them. And then the other bill was saying that the Health Facilities Committee and the Department of Health could never use these 2 types of regulations anymore. For regulating or licensing birthing centers. I worked with the medical community on this. I worked with the hospitals on this. They weren't very happy at first, but they were good to come along, because if you don't like the law, we have a process, and we have a process to change the law. But you don't use the back door, you don't use the regulatory power to obstruct laws you don't happen to like or agree with. So that was one of the big things that I did this session. And as I told my colleagues, it doesn't matter whether you like birthing centers or midwives or not. It's a much bigger issue than that. This is about the rule of law, and this is about having a committee of appointed individuals using their regulatory power to obstruct the law, which is not right in any case. So that was one of the big things that I did, and it was a little bit stressful, but I was able to get it done. Worked with a lot of people. Another issue that I tackled that I've been working on, I just finished up my 4th session. I'm finishing up my first term in office. It ends this year, and I'm running for re-election this year, so I'll just put that out there. But one of the big things that I've been working on, probably over a third of the legislation that I personally run, deals with government transparency. I think that a government that's transparent is accountable to the people. The transparency is when you shine light on something, so they say sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? If you know, as you're making decisions, if you know that there can be, someone can look at what you're doing, you'll think twice or three times about how you're spending your money and what you're doing, than if all of that is in darkness and in secret. So decisions are made differently. And so I've been working a lot on that. And this year I ran SB 99, which was a bill to deal with there were a few little exemptions out there. Actually, it was about 300 entities that were exempt from putting their financial information online. And schools have to do this. Even public hospitals have to do this. Universities have to do this. Every municipality and special service district are all subject to putting their revenues, expenditures, and staff salaries online. But there were a few, 300, that were exempt from having to do so because they had smaller budgets. And they were exempted a long time ago, 5 or 6 years ago, because maybe they didn't have internet access or something. But now I decided that it's time. Technology is it's everywhere. There's really no excuse anymore for not putting your financial information online. So that bill just simply wiped out that budgetary exemption, required all of these political subdivisions to have to put their financial transparency information online like everybody else has to do, and also required special service districts or any board, any governing body to have to put their membership on the public notice website so that people know how to get in touch with. If you have a problem, you know who to get in touch with, you know the names of the people who are representing you on those boards. It was amazing how none of them had that information online, and people just don't know who to reach out to if they've got a problem with their sewer district, or they have no idea who to go to. So the bill took care of that as well. I deal a lot with tax issues, and as you can see, we passed a $15.1 billion budget. We had about $550 million in new revenue. That didn't include some of the federal revenue, but 400 million of it was ongoing, about 150 million of it was one time. The way we determine that is we look at trends, and anything that's above trend as far as revenues in our business cycle, we determine that above the trend money is probably one-time money. It's probably some kind of an anomaly or a bubble. We don't want to overextend ourselves as a state to ongoing money, because we don't ever want to get into a structural imbalance with our budget with paying for ongoing programs with one-time money. We can get into a huge problem when we do that, and we've been really careful in our state to make sure that we budget carefully, that we're one of only a handful of states that has a AAA bond rating. We've done a really, really good job to make sure we have an economy that is ripe for economic growth, that plays fair. We're not perfect. We've got some areas to fix, but we've really tried hard. And per the state constitution, we have to balance our budget every year, unlike the federal government. So that's top priority. If there was only one thing we did every single session, it would be to pass a balanced budget. It's the most important thing that we do. But I would really love to just answer questions. We don't have a ton of time, but I would love to answer questions and talk about the things that you guys are interested in, any of the topics that I mentioned or any others.
What's the status of the lawsuit for federal land becoming state land?
We haven't undergone the lawsuit yet. We did set aside $4 million, which I'm sure you're not very happy with. But we did set aside $4 million for that lawsuit. When we became a state in 1896, the federal government said that they would, in a reasonable amount of time, dispose of the land. 2/3 of our land is owned by the federal government. And it really ties our hands because we're not benefiting at all from that land. So we don't get property tax revenues. We don't get any revenue from that land. What we get instead from the federal government as a subsidy that all the other states pay us It's called a PILT payment. It's a payment in lieu of taxes, and it's about $1 per acre. It's about $1 per acre. And sometimes we even have to fight to get that from the federal government. And so if we're concerned about educating our children and whatnot, this is one way. Gaining control of our federal land is one way to be able to adequately fund education. We really have our hands tied. And if you look at a map of the United States that has federal land versus state land, west of the Mississippi, it's almost all federal land. And east of the Mississippi, it's all state land. And so there's really a large disparity here in the West, and getting control of that is something that's really important to us as a state and as a legislature. So we did set aside the $4 million for that. As far as the actual, there has to be some timing, adequate timing issues. We're working with the federal delegation, specifically Congressman Rob Bishop, on that. I'm not on any of the Natural Resources Committees, so I'm not necessarily into the weeds on this particular issue. We all kind of have our lanes that we're in. This is not my lane, but I am aware and supportive wholeheartedly of the efforts to gain control of our federal land. I think it's a really important issue. Of course, we wouldn't, we don't want to take over the national parks or anything like that, although I think we could do a really good job for a lot less money than what the federal government charges. But we have no intention or desire or anything to put an oil rig underneath Delicate Arch. I mean, that's not what's going to happen. But I think that we in the state of Utah know how to manage our own lands much, much, much better than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. who's never set foot in our state. So I'm fully supportive of that.
What committees are you on?
So I chair the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee. I'm also on the Business and Labor Committee. I'm on the Social Services Appropriations Committee. We do things a little bit differently in Utah. It's really special the way I think the way we do our budgets. Most states, in fact, I'm not aware of any other state that does it our way. Most states have a little tiny committee of executive appropriators. It's the Executive Appropriations Committee. They're usually leadership, the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and other leaders that decide what the budget's going to be and how the money's going to be spent, and then they present that budget to the rest of the legislative body to vote on. But in Utah, we decided that the budget is a really important process, and holding people accountable, state agencies who get state money, who get taxpayer money, is a really important thing. And so we have divided the budget up into a bunch of different categories. It sounds like you need better forks next time. I think that's the second one I've heard break over here. It's pizza. It's pizza. Eat it with your hands.
That's what I resort to.
So we've divided our budget up into a bunch of different categories, and every single legislator, all 104 of us, sit on an appropriations committee and have a hand in that portion of the budget. So I'm on the Social Services Appropriations Committee. It's a $4.5 billion budget. It's the largest budget that we have in the state, even larger than education, but most of the money is federal money that we appropriate from that committee. Most of it is federal money, so there's not a lot. We're kind of told how we spend that money, but we still have the departments come before us and tell us how they account for their last year. Are these programs adequate? Are they working? Are they actually show us the data? Are they doing what their intended purpose is? And if not, how can we fix that, or where else would we be able to spend that money in a better and more appropriate way? So that is a huge process that takes up the first 3 weeks of the session. We have budget committee hearings. This last year we had budget committee hearings for 3 hours a day, every day for 3 weeks. And then that was just for our own little pieces of the budget, and then the whole rest of the budget was compiled. But I'm also on the rules committee, which is a great committee. That's where we, all of the bills that are introduced go to the rules committee, and then the rules committee determines which committees will hear, which standing committees will these bills be heard in, and we assign them out to the standing committees. So it's kind of a powerful committee, because we get to make a lot of decisions, and it's a good committee to be on. And plus, it's really, really a great committee, because the rules committee meetings are like 30 seconds long. It's awesome. Every other committee meeting is like 3 hours. This one's 30 seconds. I'm also on the Ethics Committee. I serve on a couple of ancillary committees, the Federal Funds Commission, the Women in the Economy Commission, and also the Transparency Advisory Board, and I'm also on the Utah Lake Commission. So if you ask me why I don't join the Rotary, that's why. That's why. Janice.
Could you go into, not too much detail, but I don't want you to get into the weeds, but just a Cliff Notes version of the tax bill that has been proposed by Jason, and also any tax bills similarly that are having to do with remote, with internet sales.
Okay, so the internet sales, how many of you in this room know that if you buy something online and they don't collect sales tax from you, that you personally are responsible to pay that sales tax to the State Tax Commission? Who knew that?
I know it now.
Okay, how many of you have actually done it?
Oh.
That's the problem right there. So there's been a lot of talk about online sales tax. Some people call it taxing the internet. It is not taxing the internet. That is a different topic entirely. It is about fairness, okay? Forever, any kind of remote sales transaction like catalogs or anything you order by mail back in the olden days, right, before you just could go online and order it, all of that was required. You had to pay the sales tax to the State Tax Commission. It doesn't mean because you bought it somewhere else from Utah, a remote purchase, it doesn't mean that you don't owe sales tax on it. You still do, and that has been the law forever. Just the problem is nobody does it. Nobody, probably, I don't know, 100 people a year or something actually remit their sales tax from online purchases. So nobody does it, but it's the law, and you're supposed to do it. So now that we've got the internet and we have a lot of people buying stuff online from Amazon and other places, I hear a lot of times people say, yeah, I'm going to buy that online so I don't have to pay the tax. Well, you owe the tax if you pay it online. And as we have some retailers, the Chamber of Commerce probably is all over this issue. You've got brick and mortar retailers who are required by law to take that sales tax money from you and remit it on your behalf to the State Tax Commission, okay? So they are providing a service to you as a customer so that you don't have to keep all your receipts and calculate what you owe and pay that money every year on your state income tax return. So they are required to do that. But so if you're at Target and you go and you look at Wii games and you see one you like and you pick it up and you take it to the cash register and you pay for it, you pay your sales tax, Target takes the money, they remit it to the State Tax Commission for you. You never have to worry about it. If you buy it from their website, same thing. They take the sales tax money from you, they remit it. But if you buy it from Amazon, if you go and you look at the Wii games at Target and you pull out your phone and you buy it on Amazon, they don't have to collect and remit the sales tax from you. Okay? So, so the problem is we have a larger and larger percentage of the sales happening online. Okay? And it's a disadvantage to our bricks and mortar stores that they are required to collect and remit the sales tax when certain online retailers are not. It's been a problem for a long, long time. It's not a tax increase. It is not a new tax. None of the above, okay? And the revenue that we're losing out on as a state, the sales tax revenue, the estimates are between $180 and $300 million a year that we're losing because people don't pay it. They owe it, but they don't pay it. Now, just so that you have a little overview of how we fund government, there are 3 different main buckets of money, okay? You've got income taxes in one bucket, corporate and personal income taxes. That is 100% of that money is earmarked for education. That's in our state constitution, and it always has been. So that money can't go to anything but education. Then you have sales tax, okay? Sales tax pays for everything else and some education. And the more we have to use sales tax for other things, the less money from sales tax can go to education, higher education in particular. So that is the fund that the sales tax money, that fund is being squeezed as more and more people buy more and more things online. It's a disadvantage to our businesses who are good community citizens here in the state of Utah, who are good team players, who are following the law. It's really unfortunate that we have this disparity. And actually, our state constitution, Article 8 of our state constitution, says that we have to apply taxes in a uniform manner. And that is not happening here. That is not happening here. And so Jason Chaffetz has a bill at the federal level. He's had one every year for a number of years to try to solve this problem. It really needs to be solved at a national level. I hate to say that because I'm very much a local control girl. I like things to be solved at the local level, at the state level, or even further down. But this one, because of the national nature of this, does need to be solved at the national level. And I can't talk to the specifics of his bill this year, but basically it would just require all those online retailers, and there would be some that would be exempted out because of size or whatnot, but it would require them to pay or to collect and remit the sales tax for everybody on their behalf, just like all the bricks and mortar stores are required to do. And we did try to solve the problem at the state level, which doesn't work. Amazon threatened to cut all of its contracts with our online affiliate marketers here in the state of Utah if we did that. They're really the big bully in all of this, playing everybody, and everybody is bowing to them. And it's just not right. It is not right what's happening. We passed a bill a couple of years ago that said if Congress passes a law and we suddenly get this new revenue, we're not going to spend it. It's not going to be a spending spree for the state of Utah. What we're going to do is lower the overall sales tax rate to make it revenue neutral. And there are some people who don't want us to do that. There are some people who say, no, we want the money, we want the more money. But I am a firm believer we don't need more money in the state of Utah. What we need is a level playing field. We need a low rate, broad-based tax system. So that's what we would do if Congress passes a bill. We would lower the overall sales tax rate, and all of the bills that were brought up during the session also had that in it, that we would lower the revenue comparatively, or lower the rate.
I think one of the great concerns is that once you get the federal government into it, it may be hijacked. You know what I mean? This is what often happens.
Well, that's why I don't believe that Goodlatte's bill is a good bill, because his calls for a national sales tax, and I'm sorry, there is no way I want to allow the federal government to do one more type of tax. Absolutely not. It needs to be state controlled, but it needs to be a federal law that applies equally to all the states.
You mentioned the chamber, and this was so important to us that for the first time in the history of this chamber, we did issue a statement in favor of in favor of the bill passing.
Yeah.
And it had never. That has never been.
Really?
Done.
Yeah.
This chamber has never stepped in politically.
It's a problem we have to solve. We have to solve it, especially as more and more people, I mean, we're just having the bricks and mortar stores be closing shop. And if we decide as a state that sales tax is not the way we want to fund our government, okay, we can have that policy discussion. But as long as we've decided that it is the way that we are going to fund government, it needs to be a fair, level playing field for all parties involved.
What is the name of this tax or this discussion, so that if I see it in the paper or hear about it, because I think they've changed the name of it.
Well, the bill has been changed. This year's bill is like remote sales parity or something. It used to be called marketplace fairness, but people will call it the internet tax, which it's not. That's a different issue entirely, but they confuse it with the internet tax or internet sales tax, remote sales tax. Those are some of the key words.